Last week, the US government hosted its first Summit of Democracy 2021. The Biden administration invited representatives from more than 100 countries to participate in the two-day event. However, a number of countries like Singapore and Russia were a little salty for not being invited. Not surprised here. But one country in particular did a little bit more than throwing a tantrum: China. They were so upset about not being invited to the summit and even hosted their own version of the summit called a dialogue on democracy. During the so-called dialogue, a Chinese Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs said this in his speech.
China is indeed, no doubt, a true democracy.
In case you don't understand his English, most likely it won't be. All he was saying is China is no doubt, indeed, a democracy. These people must have really thick skins. But that was not all. China's State Council even published a white paper titled China Democracy That Works to boast about how democratic China is. They even had it in both English and Chinese. Today, we'll dive into this white paper and see how the Chinese government's propaganda describes what democracy is. Welcome to Beyond the News. I'm Faye. First of all, I know I've gone missing for almost 2 months now. Apologies. But those who have been waiting for our English programs, thank you. Some of you may know I have another Chinese program on YouTube, which is currently our team's main focus. Sometimes it is a bit difficult to look after 2 channels concurrently, especially when they're in 2 different languages. But whenever there are interesting topics coming up in which I think that our perspective might add value to the conversation and help people to be more informed, we'll keep making more programs on this channel. I hope you can continue supporting Beyond the News. Thank you. Alright, let's get back to our today's topic. Before we dive into some of the details, there are 2 points I want to make about this white paper. First, this is really not a white paper, but a propaganda piece. To quote the definition of a white paper from Wikipedia, white paper is a report or guide that informs readers concisely about a complex issue. Many governments use it as a way to present their policy agenda on certain issues. If you go through this Chinese paper, there is no policy suggestion. Everything sounds vague and empty wording, and there is no real substance in this paper. All the paper did was use fancy words and lies to argue how democratic China is, and how the Chinese Communist Party's version of democracy is better than any other democracy around the world. Secondly, while this white paper is boasting about how democratic China is, pretty much every point they listed there already exists in the real democratic countries. For example, the fact that businesses have board members, shareholders, was listed as evidence that China has democratic management. Isn't that something already exists in pretty much every real democratic country around the world? Apart from that, the paper also shamelessly listed things China clearly doesn't have as a way to make themselves look good, like democratic election, government oversight, and many other items. You don't want me to list them all, trust me. I don't really know how these people were able to write the paper with a straight face. Now, let's dive into 2 specific points that I found interesting in this white paper. The first one is the honest thing the paper admits, which is that China is under dictatorship. But it is not like any other dictatorship, it's people's democratic dictatorship. Well, how did they defend this dictatorship, you may be asking? In that twisted logic, because China is a socialist country, therefore the working class are the dictators. Who controls the country, since every person is a dictator? Therefore, it is democratic. It is very creative, isn't it? Hope you are able to follow that twisted mental gymnastics. In whatever way they want to play the wording game, the fact is, every other so-called dictator has no real power in China. Well, they don't even have the right to vote anything at governmental level. The following section in the paper also revealed the true dictatorial nature of the government. The paper said, through this dictatorship, the government can take resolute action against any attempt to subvert the country's political power. For people who are unfamiliar with China's situation, that was actually a unique crime in China. the Chinese government can give it to anyone they deemed dangerous. That includes activists, human rights lawyers, protesters, and many more. In other words, anyone who shed a light on how corrupt or how bad the Chinese Communist Party is, or even just wanting to have the right to vote, can be charged with subverting the country's political power. Now, if we think about it, in a true democratic country, isn't this so-called crime actually legally protected? Just look at one perspective. Every few years, there is an election to subvert the country's political power in a real democratic country, and likely there will be a change at the political party in charge. Therefore, the fact this is a crime in China shows you how non-democratic China is. Don't forget, this is a white paper trying to tell people how democratic China is. But really, it is a paper showing how demonic the Chinese Communist Party is. Maybe this so-called white paper should be called China Demonic That Works. That would be a more appropriate and honest title, isn't it? The second thing I like to talk about is a term emphasized in the paper called the whole process people's democracy. This is a term invented by the Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2019. Since then, the CCP mouthpieces have been treating this as a gospel and using this old term to praise how great China's democracy is. In this white paper, the whole process democracy was treated as an amazing new thing, which no other country has. The way they explain it for other democratic countries, their democracy isn't whole process. They explained after a Western government getting elected, many politicians won't fulfill their campaign promises, but just doing things for their own party. Therefore, after the election, the government is no longer democratic in the Western world. Kind of deep, isn't it? When the election season came again, the cycle repeated itself. Compared to that, China's whole process democracy doesn't have the same problem, since it is democratic the whole way through, before and after the election, since there isn't one. For those who don't know much about China's political system, the flowery language of this whole process democracy is quite deceiving. But if you think about just a little bit, you can see that there isn't really anything behind it. It's just empty words. The way I see it, the whole process democracy is a fancy wording lie, and anyone who has some knowledge of Chinese politics would see it through. For example, to be democratic, the people at least need to have the right to vote, but the Chinese people don't have that at all. Did anyone in China vote for Xi Jinping to be the next president? No. He was a compromise product between different political factions. That's what it is. Therefore, I think that the more appropriate term should be the whole process dictatorship. What do you think? Leave me a comment below. Going through this China Democracy That Works white paper, I think I can say it shows just the opposite to what it says. And in fact, it doesn't have any democracy in China, which they admit themselves that China is under dictatorship. But with the newly invented twisted terms of the so-called whole process democracy, plus the opaque nature of everything about China, this white paper can be deceiving for some people. This is why we need to look through their propagandas, trying to show people the fallacy in their argument. Hopefully, we're able to shed some light on how the CCP's propaganda works and help more people to see through the CCP's lies and laugh at it. Alright, that's all for today. If you liked today's program, please give me a like and subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching Beyond the News. I'm Faye. I'll see you again very soon.